Imagine stepping outside on a quiet morning, the air still carrying the coolness of night, and the first light touching the leaves with gold. A cup of tea warms your hands as you look around your yard, noticing little corners that feel empty, waiting for a story to be told. You might think it would take a trip to an expensive store to bring beauty here, but I'm here to tell you, dear friend, it doesn't. The most enchanting pieces for your garden may already be around you, hidden in what others call trash. In my years of gardening, I've learned that transformation is as much about the heart as it is about the hands. When you give something discarded a second life, it brings not just charm to your space, but a kind of quiet pride to your soul. And today, I'm going to share 25 ways to turn the overlooked into the unforgettable, simple, doable projects that prove elegance can bloom anywhere. Do you remember that old wooden chair tucked away in the shed? The one with the wobbly leg and a seat too worn to save? Many would see it as firewood or junk, but I see a stage waiting for its next performance. Years ago, a neighbor of mine, Mrs. Evelyn, had such a chair, faded paint, peeling in soft curls, the wood sun-bleached and full of stories. Instead of throwing it away, she cut out the seat and placed a large terracotta pot in the opening. She filled it with trailing ivy cheerful marigolds and sweet-smelling alyssum. It became the jewel of her front porch, drawing smiles from anyone who walked by. The beauty of a chair planter is how forgiving it is. Even if the chair is uneven, that imperfection adds to its charm. For seniors or those with limited mobility, it's also wonderfully practical. Plants are lifted off the ground, meaning no bending or kneeling. You can set it beside a walkway under a shady tree, or even right at the garden's edge to create a welcome point for visitors. To make one yourself, start by removing or cutting out the seat panel. Place a flower pot, bowl, or basket inside the opening, anything that can hold soil. If the wood is too weathered, a quick coat of outdoor sealant or paint can help it last longer, but personally, I think the natural patina tells a better story. Choose plants that will spill over the edges, petunias, lobelia, or even strawberries if you want something edible. Keep it close enough to the house so you can water it without hauling heavy cans. One of the most touching things about these chair planters is how they can carry memories. A friend of mine used her grandmother's chair, the very one she used to sit in while sewing by the window. Now it blooms every summer in her garden, and each time she passes it, she's reminded of the hands that once polished its arms and the laughter that filled the room. That's the quiet magic of upcycling. It's not just about saving money or reducing waste. It's about keeping stories alive in plain sight. So next time you pass by a thrift store yard sale or even a neighbor's curb on trash day, keep your eyes open for a forgotten chair. Because with a little soil, a splash of color, and a touch of imagination, you can give it a new place of honor, one that will stand tall not as a piece of furniture, but as a blooming monument to second chances. There's something magical about a garden path lit by a soft, flickering glow. It draws you in, makes you slow your steps, and turns an ordinary evening into a quiet celebration. You might think those little lanterns come from specialty shops, but I learned a long time ago that beauty often comes from the recycling bin. All you need are a few tin cans, the kind that once held soup, beans, or peaches, and a spark of creativity. I remember one summer evening at my cousin Helen's house. She had lined her walkway with tin can lanterns punched with delicate patterns. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the candlelight shimmered through tiny holes, casting lacy shadows on the ground. Guests whispered as they walked up the path as if entering a secret garden. The best part, she had made them for almost nothing. Making your own tin can lanterns is easier than it looks, and it's friendly for those of us who can't handle long, strenuous projects. First, rinse the cans and remove the labels. Fill each one with water and pop them in the freezer for a few hours. This keeps the metal from denting when you punch holes. Using a hammer and a sturdy nail, tap out a pattern, maybe a cluster of stars, a simple spiral, or even your initials. When the ice melts dry, the cans and paint them in cheerful colors or leave them raw for a rustic look. To use them, simply place a tea light or battery-powered LED candle inside. For pathways, I like setting them on short wooden stumps or bricks to lift them just above the ground. You can space them every few feet along a walkway or cluster them around a patio seating area. If bending is difficult, arrange them on a table where the glow can be enjoyed without moving from your chair. What I love most about this project is the surprise factor. From a distance, they look like ordinary metal cans. But as darkness falls, they transform into glowing art pieces, quietly charming every passerby. And they're resilient. You can leave them out in the rain, and if they rust a little, well, that only adds to their story. My friend Walter once made a set of lanterns from coffee cans for his anniversary dinner in the backyard. He punched out little hearts and their wedding date, and as they sat under the stars, those glowing cans became more precious than any store-bought decoration could be. That's the beauty of these lanterns. They don't just light your path, they light your memories too. There's a certain kind of magic in a garden bench. It invites you to linger, to watch the light shift through the leaves, to listen to the gentle hum of life around you. And while store-bought benches can cost a small fortune, some of the most charming ones I've seen have been built from something humble, discarded wooden pallets. These weathered planks, often left behind at warehouses or construction sites, carry the marks of hard work and travel. With a little vision, they can become a comfortable place to sit and dream. I first discovered the beauty of pallet benches during a visit to a small bed and breakfast in Vermont. The owner, a cheerful woman named Clara, had crafted one for her garden using 2 sturdy pallets, a few screws and cushions sewn from old curtains. She told me it had cost her less than $20 and an afternoon of tinkering. The bench sat under an apple tree surrounded by lavender and daisies, and every guest seemed to find their way there at least once during their stay. Making a pallet bench doesn't require fancy tools or carpentry skills. You can stack one pallet on top of another for the seats, secure them together, and attach a third upright for the backrest. Sand any rough edges to avoid splinters, then paint or stain the wood if you'd like a more polished look. For comfort, add a cushion, something thick enough to make sitting easy on the joints. If you have trouble bending or working at ground level, you can build the bench higher by adding short legs or blocks beneath the base pallet. The real magic comes in personalizing it. You could paint it a sunny yellow to brighten a shaded corner, or leave it natural to blend into a woodland setting. A friend of mine stenciled delicate vines along the backrest of her bench, giving it the feel of something found in a storybook. Another built small side shelves into the armrests for holding teacups, seed packets, or a well-loved gardening book. Pallet benches are also wonderfully portable. Unlike heavy iron furniture, they can be moved around with a little help, letting you follow the shade on a hot day, or reposition for a better view of blooming roses. They're also a reminder of what can happen when you give new life to something forgotten. Every time I sit on a pallet bench, I'm reminded that beauty doesn't have to be bought. It can be built often with what's already around us. And there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you've made it yourself using materials that might have otherwise been left to decay. In that way, a pallet bench is more than a seat. It's a testament to patience, ingenuity, and the joy of simple living. There's a certain whimsy in a garden that feels like it's telling a story. And sometimes the smallest details make that story unforgettable. One of my favorite little touches is using glass bottles as garden borders, a project that's as beautiful as it is budget-friendly. It started for me years ago when I visited a roadside garden in a small coastal town. The walkway was lined with bottles of every shade: emerald green, cobalt blue, golden amber, half buried upside down, so their necks disappeared into the soil and their rounded bottoms caught the sunlight like jewels. The charm of a bottle border is in its simplicity. You can gather bottles from thrift shops, recycling centers, or even your own kitchen. Wine bottles, soda bottles, and even vintage milk bottles all work. Wash them thoroughly and remove any labels. If bending is a challenge, you can work on the border in stages, placing a few bottles at a time until the full path is complete. The process is gentle. Dig a shallow trench where you want your border deep enough for about 1/3 of each bottle to be buried. Place the bottles upside down, side by side, pressing the soil firmly around them so they stand securely. For a more artistic effect, you can alternate colors, create a repeating pattern, or arrange them in a gentle curve to mimic the natural flow of the garden. I remember a dear friend, Ruth, who made an entire flower bed border from blue bottles she had saved for years. In the early morning light, they seemed to glow from within, and in the evening, the fading sun set them alight like tiny lanterns. She once told me that each bottle reminded her of a gathering, a toast, or a celebration in her life. Her border wasn't just decoration. It was a trail of memories marking the seasons of her life as surely as the flowers themselves. For those who like a little extra sparkle, you can slip small battery-powered fairy lights into some of the bottles, letting them glow softly at night. Just imagine walking along a path edged with colored glass that shines in the day and twinkles in the dark. This project proves that elegance doesn't have to come from something new or costly. It can be found in the humble objects we've already touched, shared, and loved. In a way, a glass bottle border is more than garden decor. It's a celebration of reuse, a reflection of light, and a quiet invitation to slow down and notice the beauty beneath our feet. Some items seem to retire gracefully, and an old wooden ladder is one of them. Its rungs may no longer feel safe beneath a boot, but its frame still carries the charm of years gone by, paint speckled from past projects, worn smooth where hands once held on tight. Rather than leaving it to gather dust in a shed or hauling it to the curb, you can give that ladder a dignified second life as a vertical plant stand. I first saw this idea at a small farmer's market in the countryside. A vendor had leaned a weathered ladder against the side of her stall, each rung holding a wooden crate or galvanized bucket brimming with flowers and herbs. There were trailing petunias spilling over the edges, fragrant basil ready to be pinched, and cheerful marigolds catching the morning sun. It wasn't just functional. It felt like a piece of living art, telling visitors they'd stumbled into a place where creativity bloomed. Making your own ladder plant stand doesn't require heavy lifting or complicated work. Simply clean the ladder, making sure it's stable. If the wood is rough, a light sanding will protect hands and plants from splinters. You can leave the finish as is for a rustic charm or brush on a coat of paint for a brighter touch. To display plants, you can set pots directly on the rungs if they're wide enough, or rest planks across 2 rungs to create small shelves. For those with limited mobility, the beauty of this design is that it brings plants up to eye level, making watering and tending easier. You can position the ladder near a sunny wall or under a covered porch, so you don't have to step too far to enjoy it. And because it uses vertical space, it's perfect for small patios or balconies where every inch counts. One of my friends, Martha, used her late father's ladder for this project. She told me how he used it every year to prune their apple tree, and now, instead of being stored away, it holds pots of thyme, oregano, and mint right outside her kitchen door. Every time she plucks a sprig for dinner, she feels as though she's still sharing a task with him. That's the kind of quiet, personal meaning an upcycled piece can carry, turning something purely practical into a living memory. A worn-out ladder, once a tool for reaching higher places, becomes a stage for blooms and greenery, still lifting beauty upward. It reminds us that just because something's first purpose has ended doesn't mean its usefulness or its grace has to fade. There's something sweetly nostalgic about an old teacup, the kind with a delicate handle and a faint ring where countless cups of tea have been poured. Sometimes they sit forgotten at the back of a cupboard, chipped or mismatched, waiting for someone to see their charm again. I learned just how magical they could be for a garden when my neighbor Doris invited me over one spring morning. Hanging from the branches of her lilac tree were half a dozen teacups, each filled with birdseed, swaying gently as goldfinches and chickadees came to feast. The cups caught the morning light like little lanterns, and the air was full of fluttering wings. Turning a teacup into a bird feeder is a simple joy. You can find them at thrift stores for just a few cents, or use one from your own kitchen that's seen better days. First, pair it with its saucer, gluing the two together with a strong, waterproof adhesive, so the saucer becomes a little platform for birds to perch on. Once it's dry, you can attach a loop of sturdy twine or thin chain to the handle for hanging. Fill the cup with seed, hang it on a low branch, and watch your garden come alive. For those who prefer not to hang feeders, you can also place the cup and saucer set on a post or railing. This way you can enjoy the sight of your winged visitors without craning your neck. And because teacups are small, they're easy to clean and refill, a plus for those of us who don't want to carry heavy containers around. I recall another friend, Irene, who filled hers not just with birdseed, but also with a shallow layer of water on hot summer days. Tiny sparrows would hop onto the saucer's edge to drink, dipping their beaks daintily before darting back into the trees. She told me it reminded her of afternoons at her grandmother's house when tea was served in those same delicate cups, and the garden was always alive with birdsong. Part of the magic here is how these feeders blend elegance and usefulness. They're not just practical, They're a gentle nod to hospitality, extending the same warmth to the creatures in your yard that you would to a guest at your table. And perhaps most importantly, they show that beauty needn't be perfect to be valued. A chip, a crack, or a faded pattern doesn't make a teacup less worthy. It simply adds to the story it's telling. So the next time you come across a lonely teacup, think of it not as kitchenware past its prime, but as a future gathering place for songbirds, a little cup of joy waiting to be shared. There's a certain kind of poetry in an old wheelbarrow, the way its paint fades to soft earth tones, the metal rusts in gentle freckles, and the wooden handles carry the smoothness of years of work. It might no longer be sturdy enough to haul soil or stones, but that doesn't mean its work in the garden is done. One summer, I visited a friend's farm, and right by the kitchen door sat a rusted wheelbarrow, overflowing with herbs, basil, rosemary, thyme, and mint, their scents mingling in the warm air. She told me she'd rescued the wheelbarrow from the scrap heap, cleaned it out, and turned it into her favorite planter. Transforming a wheelbarrow into an herb garden is as easy as it is rewarding. Start by making sure it can drill a few small holes in the bottom if needed. Then fill it with a good potting mix and plant your herbs close enough to create a lush, full look. Because the wheelbarrow raises the soil off the ground, it's kinder to your back and knees, making tending and harvesting much easier. And the beauty of it being mobile means you can wheel it into more sun or shade as the seasons change. I've seen gardeners paint their old wheelbarrows in cheerful colors, sunflower yellow, sage green, sky blue, or leave them untouched to keep their weathered charm. Either way, they become a talking point, a little statement piece that says, "I value what's been used and loved." You can also mix herbs with flowers for a touch of beauty alongside your kitchen staples, lavender with parsley, marigolds with chives. The combinations are endless. One of the loveliest examples I've encountered belonged to an elderly couple, Grace and Albert. They had filled their wheelbarrow with herbs specifically for their grandchildren, sweet mint for tea, basil for homemade pizza, chamomile for calming bedtime drinks. Every visit, the children would run straight to the wheelbarrow to pick leaves, their small fingers brushing the fragrant plants as if gathering treasure. Grace told me the wheelbarrow wasn't just a planter, it was a lesson in growing, sharing, and savoring simple joys. What makes this project so special is how it turns an object that might have been discarded into something vibrant and full of life. It's proof that with a bit of creativity, even the most worn-out tools can keep serving the garden just in a new way. A rusted wheelbarrow might not roll as far as it used to, but it can still carry beauty, fragrance, and purpose right to your doorstep. There's a quiet magic in seeing a garden softly glow at dusk, like it's holding a secret just for you. One of the simplest ways to capture that feeling is with mason jar solar lights. I first fell in love with the idea while visiting my cousin's home one summer evening. She had lined her back fence with jars that twinkled like tiny stars trapped in glass. As we sat outside, the warm light gave the garden a gentle, welcoming heartbeat, and I remember thinking how it felt like stepping into a dream. The beauty of this project is that it's both affordable and accessible. You only need a few mason jars, any size will do, and small solar light inserts, which you can find at dollar stores or garden centers. The lids can be drilled to fit the solar panel top, or you can simply remove the stake from the solar light and place the head right inside the jar. Because they run on sunlight, there's no need for wiring or batteries, making them especially friendly for those of us who prefer easy, fuss-free projects. These jars can be set on tables, lined along walkways, or hung from tree branches with sturdy wire. Hanging them brings the light closer to eye level, where it can be appreciated without bending or stooping. On breezy nights, the jars sway gently, scattering light across leaves and flowers like moonlight rippling over water. I once helped my friend Lydia make a set for her small balcony garden. We decorated the jars with lace ribbons and pressed flower decals before slipping in the lights. When evening came, her balcony transformed into a soft-lit retreat where she could read, sip tea, and watch the city lights in the distance. She told me later it became her favorite spot to wind down after long days, and the fact that she'd made the lights herself made them feel even warmer. The joy of mason jar solar lights is that they combine practicality with poetry. They guide your steps after dark, but they also remind you to pause and enjoy the simple beauty of light itself. There's no glare, no harshness, just a steady glow that turns your outdoor space into something intimate and inviting. And perhaps most charming of all, they require almost no maintenance. As long as they're placed where sunlight can reach them, they'll recharge each day, ready to greet you when the sun goes down. In a way, they're like quiet companions, always there, always gentle, always adding a little extra magic to the night. There's something deeply comforting about a garden space that feels like your own little world. A place where you can sip your tea without feeling overlooked, where the wind moves softly through the leaves and the day's noise seems far away. One creative way to carve out such a space without building heavy structures or spending a fortune is by turning old shutters into a privacy screen. I first saw this idea at a flea market in Savannah. A vendor had set up a small outdoor seating area, framed by tall hinged shutters, painted in shades of soft sage and cream. The slats let in just enough light to keep the space airy, yet created a gentle shield from passing eyes. It felt like sitting in a secret garden, even though we were in the middle of a busy street. The beauty of a shutter privacy screen is that it's lightweight, portable, and adaptable. You can find old shutters at salvage yards, thrift stores, or even curbside during neighborhood cleanups. Simply clean them, give them a fresh coat of paint if desired, and attach them with simple hinges so they can stand upright in a zigzag formation. For extra stability, you can anchor them in planters filled with soil and flowers, blending function with beauty. If bending or heavy lifting is difficult, you can work on one shutter at a time, painting or sanding it while it rests on a table. Once assembled, the screen can be moved without much effort, allowing you to change your garden's layout with the seasons. Some people even decorate their shutters with small hanging baskets of flowers or herbs, making them both practical and decorative. My friend Ellen used her grandmother's old shutters to create a privacy corner on her patio. She painted them a soft robin's egg blue and hung small mason jar lanterns along the slats. At night, the light spilled through in gentle stripes, casting patterns on the ground. She told me it became her favorite reading nook, a place where she could watch the sunset in peace, while still feeling connected to the garden around her. There's a quiet symbolism in using shutters this way. Once part of a home's windows, they now guard moments of rest and reflection outdoors. They remind us that privacy doesn't have to mean isolation. It can simply be a gentle frame around the moments we want to savor. And much like the plants they shelter, these shutters find a second life in the sunlight, standing proudly in a new role that suits them perfectly. Some kitchen tools seem destined for a second life in the garden, and the humble metal colander is one of them. With its ready-made drainage holes and sturdy handles, it's practically begging to hold a cascade of flowers. I first stumbled on this idea at a small cafe with a courtyard seating area. Above each table hung a brightly painted colander overflowing with petunias, ivy, and trailing lobelia. The blooms draped down like soft curtains, and when the breeze passed through the entire scene, seemed to sway with a gentle rhythm. Creating a colander hanging basket is one of the easiest and most satisfying projects you can do. You can find old colanders at thrift stores for just $1 or $2, or perhaps there's one hiding in your own cupboard that's seen better days. Start by giving it a good wash, then if you wish, spray paint it in a cheerful color, sunny yellow, sky blue, or even a bright red for a pop of contrast. The existing holes make perfect drainage, so all you need to do is line the inside with a bit of coconut coir or moss to keep the soil in place. Fill it with a lightweight potting mix and choose plants that trail beautifully over the edges. Nasturtiums, sweet potato vine, or wave petunias work wonderfully. Attach a sturdy chain or rope to the handles for hanging. For those who prefer not to lift heavy objects, you can hang the colander low from a shepherd's hook or porch beam, making it easy to water and tend without stretching or bending too much. One summer, my friend Margaret created a series of colander baskets for her backyard fence. She painted each one a different pastel shade and planted them with herbs instead of flowers, basil in the green colander, lavender in the purple, parsley in the white. Guests loved the unexpected display, and Margaret loved that she could snip fresh herbs without bending down to a garden bed. It turned her fence into a living, functional work of art. The beauty of using colanders is that they invite a touch of whimsy into your space. They remind us that gardening doesn't have to be serious or expensive. It can be playful, colorful, and full of personality. And when the blooms spill over the sides, no one will think about where they came from. They'll only see the joy they bring. In a way, these baskets are a perfect example of how the ordinary can become extraordinary. A tool once used to drain pasta now cradles blossoms in the sun, proof that with a little imagination, life can be repurposed into something unexpectedly beautiful. There's something irresistibly charming about turning a forgotten drawer into a blooming little garden. An old dresser might be too broken to save, but its drawers scuffed with knobs a bit loose and wood worn smooth from years of use can still hold beauty. I first saw this done at a church rummage sale where someone had lined a walkway with drawers filled with pansies, marigolds, and trailing alyssum. They looked like tiny colorful suitcases, each carrying its own patch of life. Making a drawer flower bed is a wonderfully simple project. Start by cleaning the drawer and drilling a few small drainage holes in the bottom. If you like, paint it in a color that matches your garden style: white for cottage charm, deep teal for a bold statement, or simply leave the wood bare for a rustic touch. Line the bottom with a bit of landscape fabric to help hold the soil, then fill it with a light potting mix. Because drawers are shallow, choose plants that thrive without deep roots: pansies, succulents, violas, or dwarf marigolds. You can also mix in herbs like thyme or oregano for a fragrant, edible twist. Place the drawers on a sturdy table, an old bench, or even stacked in a staggered arrangement on the ground for a tiered look. This makes them accessible without too much bending or lifting. I remember visiting my friend Judy, who had transformed a set of her mother's dresser drawers into a layered display on her porch. The top drawer held lavender that caught the breeze, the middle one overflowed with trailing lobelia, and the bottom was filled with cheerful geraniums. Judy told me that every time she watered them, she thought of her mother's hands opening those same drawers to tuck away linens and scarves. What once stored fabric now cradled blooms, carrying love from one generation to the next. For added flair, you can swap the drawer pulls for vintage knobs, paint small designs on the sides, or stencil the plant names right onto the wood. And if the drawer is too deep, you can fill the bottom with lightweight materials like empty bottles or foam before adding soil. This makes the planter lighter and easier to move. The joy of a drawer flower bed lies in its balance between familiarity and surprise. It's an everyday object with a past now bursting with color and fragrance. It's a reminder that beauty doesn't require a blank slate. It can grow in places already marked by life, in containers that have their own history to tell. Every once in a while, you come across a piece in a garden that makes you stop, smile, and feel like you've stepped into a storybook. For me, one of those moments was stumbling upon an old-fashioned bicycle leaned against a fence, its basket and spokes overflowing with blooms. The paint was chipped, the tires flat, and the handlebars a little crooked, but it had been given a second life, one that made it feel like the heart of the garden. Turning a bicycle into a garden sculpture isn't complicated, and it works whether you have a sprawling yard or a small porch. Start with a bicycle that's no longer safe to ride. Thrift shops, garage sales, or even the back of your own shed might yield one. Give it a good cleaning and then decide if you want to keep its weathered charm or give it a fresh coat of paint. Soft pastels like mint green or lavender can add a romantic touch, while bright colors like red or sunflower yellow make it pop against greenery. Add baskets to the front and back, or even small crates attached to the frame. Line them with coconut coir or moss, fill with lightweight potting soil, and plant flowers that will spill gracefully over the edges. Petunias, ivy, geraniums, or trailing lobelia all work beautifully. For those who prefer low-maintenance plants, succulents can create a striking modern look. If bending is a challenge, the height of the bicycle makes planting and watering easier without stooping. I once visited a woman named Lillian who had placed her late father's bicycle in the middle of her garden as a tribute. He had ridden it to work every day for decades, and now it stood among the roses, its baskets filled with seasonal blooms. She told me it made her feel like he was still a part of the garden, quietly watching over it. In the evenings, she wove small solar fairy lights through the spokes, so the bicycle glowed softly under the moonlight. Bicycles can also be used to guide the eye through your outdoor space. Positioned at the entrance to a path, it can signal that you're about to step into somewhere special. They work well tucked under a tree, set against a fence, or even indoors in a sunroom for year-round charm. What I love most about this idea is how it combines movement and stillness. A bicycle once meant to travel now becomes a stationary anchor for beauty proof that life's second chapters can be just as meaningful as the first. In a way, it's a reminder that even when our pace slows, we can still bring joy, color, and purpose to the spaces around us. There's something about an old tire swing that tugs at the heart, a reminder of warm summer days, bare feet on grass, and the wind rushing past as you soared higher and higher. But when the rope frays and the tire is no longer safe for play, it doesn't have to end up in the landfill. With a little creativity, it can become a joyful hanging planter, bringing color and life back to your garden. I first saw this idea in my neighbor Clara's backyard. She'd taken the tire from her grandchildren's old swing, scrubbed it clean, and painted it a sunny yellow. It hung from the sturdy branch of a maple tree, its hollow center filled with a burst of trailing petunias and sweet potato vine. The flowers draped down like a living waterfall, and in the breeze, the whole planter swayed just enough to catch the light. To make your own start by cleaning the tire well, soap water and a stiff brush will do the job. Drill a few small drainage holes in the bottom, then decide whether you want to hang it vertically or horizontally. A vertical display keeps the tire's circular shape visible, while a horizontal one gives you more planting space. Line the inside with coconut coir or landscape fabric to hold the soil, then fill with a lightweight potting mix. Choose flowers that trail over the sides for the most dramatic effect. If lifting is a concern, you can prepare and plant the tire while it's lying flat on the ground, then hang it with help. Use strong rope or chain to secure it, making sure it's positioned where it can sway gently without bumping into walls or branches. For an extra touch, you can paint patterns, polka dots, vines, or even stenciled words like welcome or bloom. One of my favorite variations came from a couple I met at a garden tour. They had hung a pair of tire planters, one filled with bright red geraniums and the other with cascading ivy on either side of their backyard gate. They told me they'd used the tires from their first family car, making the display not just pretty, but deeply personal. Every time they walked through that gate, they felt a little of their shared history wrapped up in those blooms. The tire swing planter is more than a clever way to reuse old rubber. It's a celebration of play, memory, and renewal. It reminds us that even when a chapter closes, the story isn't over. Sometimes it just blooms in a different way. There's something soothing about the sound of trickling water in a garden. It slows the pace of your thoughts, invites birds to visit, and turns even the smallest corner into a place of rest. You might think you need an expensive fountain to achieve that effect, but sometimes all it takes is an old metal pail, a simple pump, and a bit of imagination. I first saw this idea at a local craft fair where a woman named Hazel had transformed a dented galvanized bucket into the centerpiece of her garden. She'd placed it on a stack of bricks, added a small solar-powered pump, and let the water spill gently over a pile of smooth river stones. The result was charming, rustic, yet elegant, and the soft splashing seemed to make her whole yard feel cooler on that warm summer day. To create your own, start by cleaning the pail thoroughly. If it leaks, you can line it with a waterproof pond liner or use a sealant made for metal. Place a small submersible or solar pump inside, following the manufacturer's instructions. Arrange stones, shells, or even pieces of driftwood around the pump to hide it and create natural flow patterns for the water. Fill the pail with clean water, turn on the pump, and adjust the flow until you find the rhythm you like. If heavy lifting is an issue, you can set the pail on a sturdy table or stand so you won't have to bend down to work with it. This also brings the sound closer to ear level, making it even more relaxing. You can surround it with potted plants, ferns, impatiens, or hostas to create a little oasis of green. One of my favorite examples was from a couple named John and Millie who used the pail from their old farm well. They kept it on their porch so they could enjoy the sound of water while reading in the evenings. Millie told me it reminded her of her childhood when she'd help her father fill buckets for the garden, and the cool splash of water was a welcome relief in the summer heat. A metal pail water feature doesn't just add beauty, it adds life. The sound attracts birds, the shimmer draws your eyes, and the movement keeps the space feeling fresh and alive. It's proof that even the most ordinary objects can hold extraordinary peace if we're willing to see them in a new way. There's a quiet romance in an old window frame, the chipped paint, the weathered wood, the way it seems to hold the memory of sunlight filtering through glass long gone. When I first saw one repurposed into a trellis, it stopped me in my tracks. In a small cottage garden, a white painted frame leaned against a fence, its open panes filled not with glass, but with climbing sweet peas, their blooms spilling through like a scene from another era. Creating a window frame trellis is surprisingly simple and gentle on the body. Start by finding a sturdy frame, no glass needed. You can often find them at thrift stores, salvage yards, or even from old houses being remodeled. Give it a light sanding to remove loose paint, then seal it with outdoor wood sealant, or paint it in a color that complements your garden. For extra support, you can staple chicken wire or garden netting to the back, so plants have more to cling to. Position the frame where it will get enough sunlight for your chosen climbers, lean it against a wall, mount it to a fence, or secure it between two posts. Then plant your climbers at the base, morning glories, sweet peas, clematis, or even beans, if you'd like an edible twist. Because the frame is vertical, it keeps plants off the ground, making care and harvesting easier for those who can't kneel or bend for long. I remember visiting a friend named Carol, who had turned her grandmother's window frame into a trellis for pink climbing roses. She told me the frame had once looked out over a wide front porch, and now it looked over her garden instead. When the roses were in full bloom, it was as if the frame itself had become a picture, one that changed with the seasons and the years. You can make this project as simple or as decorative as you like. Some gardeners leave the frame rustic, letting vines soften its lines, while others decorate the wood with stenciled designs or small hooks for hanging lanterns. In the evening, fairy lights woven through the frame can turn it into a glowing garden portal. The charm of a window frame trellis is that it invites you to look at your garden differently, literally framing your flowers and giving them a stage to climb and shine. It's a reminder that sometimes beauty is about perspective, and even something no longer serving its original purpose can still open onto a lovely view. Every gardener knows the satisfaction of seeing neat little rows of herbs or vegetables coming to life. But remembering what you planted where, that can be another story. Instead of buying plastic tags, you can make charming, eco-friendly garden markers from something you might already have in your kitchen, a handful of wine corks. I first spotted this idea in my friend Denise's raised herb bed. Neatly tucked among the parsley, basil, and thyme were corks perched on slender bamboo skewers, each one neatly labeled in black ink. They looked like miniature signposts, and they brought a touch of warmth and personality to her garden. Making wine cork garden markers is a quick, no-strain project. Simply collect your corks, real cork works best, and use a permanent marker to write the name of each plant. For a cleaner look, you can print labels and glue them on, sealing them with a weatherproof finish. Then push a wooden skewer chopstick or sturdy wire into one end of the cork to create a little stake. Insert the marker into the soil beside your plant, and you're done. If bending is difficult, this project can be done entirely at a table. You can prepare all your markers indoors, then place them in the garden with minimal effort. The corks are weather-resistant, and if they start to fade after a season, they can easily be refreshed or replaced. One of my favorite versions came from a couple who ran a small vineyard. They saved corks from their wine tastings and used them as markers in their vegetable garden. Each cork carried the memory of a special event, a birthday, an anniversary, a family dinner, and seeing them among the plants felt like a quiet celebration of shared moments. You can also get creative with the writing. Instead of just the plant's name, add a small doodle, a favorite gardening quote, or even a bit of humor. Imagine a row of tomatoes marked with a cork that says, "Future Sauce." For kids or grandkids, decorating corks with paint or stickers can turn it into a fun family project. The beauty of wine cork markers is that they're simple, sustainable, and full of personality. They don't just tell you where your mint ends and your oregano begins. They tell a story of the meals, conversations, and memories tied to those corks. In the garden, even the smallest details can make the space feel like yours. And these little markers are proof that charm can come from the humblest of things. There's a special kind of satisfaction in creating something beautiful and useful out of what might otherwise be tossed away. Wooden crates once used to carry fruit bottles or supplies have a sturdy charm and a rustic texture that make them perfect for repurposing. One of my favorite transformations is turning a crate into a side table for the garden or patio, a spot to set your tea, a book, or a vase of fresh-picked flowers. I first saw this idea at my friend Nora's home. She had a small seating area under her oak tree with 2 mismatched chairs and a weathered crate between them. She'd sanded the rough edges, brushed on a coat of pale blue paint, and topped it with a round piece of glass. Under the glass, she'd tucked dried lavender sprigs and seashells, giving the table a personal, almost storybook quality. It was practical, but it also made you want to linger there as if the table itself invited conversation. Making your own wooden crate side table is simple and adaptable. Start by finding a crate in good shape. Many grocery stores or markets will give them away for free. Sand it to remove splinters, then decide whether to leave it natural for a rustic look or paint it to match your decor. If you plan to leave it outdoors, a coat of weatherproof sealant will help it last longer. For the tabletop, you can add a piece of glass, a wooden board, or even a tile mosaic for a touch of artistry. Because crates are lightweight, you can move the table easily, a real benefit for those who want to rearrange seating areas or follow the shade on warm afternoons. The hollow inside also offers storage for garden gloves, seed packets, or a folded throw blanket for chilly evenings. And if bending is a concern, you can place the crate on short legs or stacked bricks to raise it to a more comfortable height. One of the most charming examples I've seen was in a small urban balcony garden. The owner, a retired teacher named Harriet, used 3 stacked crates for a taller table, each filled with potted plants. The top held her morning coffee and notebook, while the lower crates overflowed with trailing ivy and colorful annuals. She told me it felt like having a living piece of furniture, part table, part garden, part memory keeper. A wooden crate side table is more than just a surface. It's an expression of resourcefulness and warmth. It proves that elegance can be simple, and that with a little imagination, even the most ordinary object can become part of the rhythm of your daily life. There's a special charm in a garden path that feels like it's guiding you through a story, and one of the most enchanting ways to create that feeling is with a mosaic of broken ceramic plates. At first, the idea might sound unusual. After all, most of us think of cracked dishes as accidents to be swept away. But in a garden, those colorful fragments can find new life pieced together into a walkway that glimmers under the sun and tells a tale with every step. I first encountered such a path in the backyard of an artist's cottage. She had taken mismatched plates collected over decades, some chipped, some from thrift stores, some gifted by friends, and broken them into shards. These she set into a winding path, the colors and patterns swirling together like a quilt laid out on the ground. As I walked barefoot along it, the warm tiles underfoot and the sunlight bouncing off their glossy surfaces made it feel almost magical. Creating your own ceramic plate path starts with gathering plates you no longer use. Thrift stores are often overflowing with inexpensive options, floral patterns, bold colors, and even delicate china. To break them safely, wrap each plate in a towel and gently tap it with a hammer until you have pieces of the size you want. Wear gloves while working to protect your hands. Lay the pieces into a bed of sand or mortar, arranging them in patterns or letting them fall into a more whimsical, random design. Once the layout feels right, fill the gaps with more sand or grout to secure them in place. For those who want to avoid kneeling, the project can be done in small sections over time, using a low table to prepare your mosaic before transferring it to the ground. One of my favorite stories came from a couple who created a plate path leading from their kitchen door to their herb garden. Each plate had a memory, a souvenir from a trip, a gift from a wedding, a piece from their grandmother's china set. Walking that path became a daily ritual, reminding them not only of the plants they tended, but also of the people and moments that shaped their lives. A ceramic plate garden path is more than just a walkway. It's a patchwork of history and artistry, proof that beauty can grow from what's been broken. Every time you walk along it, you're treading a path that celebrates resilience, creativity, and the joy of giving old things a new place in the world. Cinder blocks might not sound like the makings of garden beauty. They're heavy gray and often hidden in construction sites. But with a little paint and imagination, they can become striking planters that are as sturdy as they are stylish. I first saw this transformation in a neighbor's front yard, where a wall of painted blocks held a mix of succulents, herbs, and cascading flowers. The blocks were arranged like a playful puzzle, each opening a small home for greenery, and the colors turned an ordinary structure into something joyful. Creating cinder block planters begins with arranging the blocks in a way that suits your space, stacked in tiers, lined up along a path, or even built into a low wall. Their built-in holes are perfect for planting, and because they're raised, they reduce the need to bend or kneel. Before planting, give the blocks a quick rinse and let them dry. Then comes the fun part: painting. Choose weather-resistant outdoor paint, and don't be afraid to mix bright colors with soft pastels for a lively look. Once the paint is dry, line the planting holes with landscape fabric or coffee filters to keep soil from washing out. Fill them with a lightweight potting mix and choose plants that thrive in smaller spaces: succulents, dwarf marigolds, pansies, or even small kitchen herbs. If you prefer less maintenance, go for drought-tolerant varieties, so watering is minimal. I remember helping my friend Paul create a cinder block planter wall for his back patio. He painted the blocks in shades of turquoise, coral, and white, then planted them with a mix of basil, mint, and thyme. The height made it easy for him to harvest herbs for cooking without stooping, and in the evenings he strung fairy lights through the openings for a warm glow. He told me it completely changed the way he used his outdoor space, turning a bare wall into both a garden and a conversation piece. The beauty of painted cinder block planters is that they're endlessly adaptable. You can rearrange them, expand them, or even take them apart if you move. They're affordable, long-lasting, and able to withstand all kinds of weather. And because each block can hold its own plant, you can mix colors, textures, and scents in one compact display. What I love most is how they prove that beauty can come from the most utilitarian of objects. Something built for strength and function alone can, with a touch of creativity, become a showcase for life and color. A reminder that even the plainest things can surprise us when given a chance to bloom. There's a touch of magic in seeing something elegant and forgotten brought back to life in the garden. An old chandelier, once the centerpiece of a dining room, can be turned into a whimsical hanging planter that drips with flowers instead of crystals. I first saw one at a friend's summer party, swaying gently under her pergola. Where candle cups had once held flickering flames, now bloomed trailing petunias, ivy, and delicate lobelia. It looked like a bouquet suspended in midair, dancing with every breeze. Transforming a chandelier into a planter starts with finding one that's no longer wired or in working order. Thrift stores, flea markets, or even your attic might have just the thing. Remove any wiring, clean it well, and decide whether to keep its original patina or paint it to suit your garden's style. Soft white, gold, or pastel shades can enhance its charm, while bold colors can make it a striking statement piece. Where the candle holders sit, place small pots or bowls that fit snugly. You can secure them with waterproof adhesive if needed. Fill with lightweight potting mix and choose trailing plants that will spill gracefully downward. Petunias, fuchsias, and creeping jenny are perfect choices for a lush, cascading effect. If lifting is a concern, plant the chandelier while it rests on a table, then hang it with help from a sturdy chain or hook. One of the most memorable examples I've seen belonged to a woman named Frances, who inherited her mother's brass chandelier. Instead of storing it away, she painted it a soft lavender and planted it with pale pink impatiens. She hung it from a low branch in her yard, just above a bench where she liked to read. Frances said it felt like her mother's grace was still present now, watching over her garden instead of her dining table. The beauty of an upside-down chandelier planter is its blend of elegance and playfulness. It draws the eye upward, encouraging you to notice the vertical space in your garden. It also makes use of an object that might otherwise be discarded, proving that refinement isn't lost when an item's first life ends. It can simply take a different form. Every time the wind moves it, the plants sway like fabric in an old ballroom, reminding you that beauty doesn't fade, it just finds new ways to shine. Some garden ideas seem almost poetic in the way they bring life to forgotten things, and turning an old bed frame into a trellis is one of them. A metal or wooden headboard with its graceful lines and sturdy frame can become the perfect support for climbing plants. I first came across this idea at a small country inn where an ornate iron headboard stood against a brick wall draped in morning glories. The flowers curled around each bar as though they had found a home they'd been searching for all along. Creating a bed frame trellis begins with finding a headboard or footboard. Flea markets, thrift shops, and curbside pickups are excellent sources. Choose one made from materials that can withstand outdoor weather like metal or treated wood. If needed, give it a coat of rust-resistant paint or weatherproof sealant. Then secure it upright in your garden, either by driving stakes into the ground behind it or fastening it to a fence for added stability. Plant climbers at the base, sweet peas, clematis, climbing roses, or beans for an edible touch. As they grow, guide their tendrils through the bars or decorative scrolls, allowing the plants to weave their own tapestry. The height of the frame makes tending easy without stooping, and the design naturally encourages vertical growth, saving space for other plants. One of the most touching uses I've seen was from my friend June, who repurposed her parents' old brass bed frame after they passed. She placed it at the edge of her garden and planted red climbing roses, her mother's favorite. Now, every summer, the frame blooms in their honor, a quiet and beautiful reminder of the love that once filled that bed and still lingers in her life. For a whimsical twist, some gardeners hang small lanterns or fairy lights along the frame, creating a glowing backdrop in the evenings. Others paint the headboard in bright colors to make it pop even when the plants are dormant. What I love most about the bed frame trellis is how it transforms an object tied to rest and dreams into one that supports growth and beauty. It's a bridge between past and present memory and renewal. And each season, as the plants climb higher, they seem to whisper a simple truth that love and care can always find something to hold on to. There's a rugged beauty in old tin roofing waves of corrugated metal, worn smooth by rain, sun, and years of sheltering someone's home. When those sheets are no longer fit for a roof, they can still tell a story in the garden, especially when painted into colorful wall art. I first saw this idea while visiting a roadside farm stand. The side of the building was covered with pieces of tin painted in wildflowers, birds, and country scenes, turning what might have been a dull wall into a joyful outdoor gallery. To make your own, start by finding a piece of tin roofing at a salvage yard or construction site. Even a small section can become a statement piece. Clean it thoroughly to remove rust flakes and dirt, then prime it with a base coat made for metal surfaces. From there, you can let your creativity run free. Paint bold sunflowers, a sweeping mountain view, or even a favorite quote in large looping letters. Outdoor acrylic paints work well, and a clear weatherproof sealant will keep your design looking fresh through the seasons. If heavy lifting isn't practical, you can work with smaller cut sections of tin, which are easier to handle and arrange like a patchwork mural. These can be mounted on a fence shed, or even leaned against a wall behind a flower bed. Their reflective surface catches light beautifully, making colors pop in the morning sun or after a rain shower. One of my favorite stories came from a retired art teacher named Edna. She collected old tin scraps from her family's farm and painted each one with scenes from her childhood, her father's tractor, the red barn, the apple orchard in bloom. She hung them along the fence by her vegetable garden, where her grandchildren loved to walk and point out the pictures. Edna told me it felt like keeping her memories alive in the very soil where they were made. Painted tin roof art can be as simple or as detailed as you want, and it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. In fact, the little dents and scratches add to its charm, reminding you that this piece has already lived a life before yours. In the garden, it stands as a splash of color against greenery, a conversation starter, and a testament to the idea that even weathered, worn materials can still hold beauty. When you look at your painted tin in years to come, you won't just see art. You'll see the way you brought life back to something that had given all it could and offered it a new story to tell. Sometimes the most surprising gardening solutions come from the most ordinary household items. A simple fabric shoe organizer, the kind meant to hang on a closet door, can be transformed into a lush, vertical garden that fits perfectly on a fence balcony or small wall. I first discovered this idea while visiting my niece's apartment in the city. With no backyard and only a narrow balcony, she had turned her shoe organizer into rows of thriving herbs, lettuces, and even strawberries, all growing within arm's reach. To make your own, start with a sturdy fabric or canvas shoe organizer. Plastic versions can work too, but breathable fabric helps with drainage. Hang it in a sunny spot using hooks or nails, making sure it's secure enough to hold the weight of soil and plants. Line each pocket with a small piece of landscape fabric or coffee filter to prevent soil from washing out. Then fill with lightweight potting mix. Choose plants that grow well in small spaces. Parsley, basil, thyme, and oregano for herbs or pansies, and petunias for a burst of color. Watering is simple as the excess drains downward, feeding the plants below. For those with limited mobility, the vertical setup keeps everything at a comfortable height, making it easier to tend without bending or kneeling. And because the pockets are separate, you can grow a variety of plants without worrying about them competing for space. I remember a woman named Clara who used this method on the side of her garden shed. She planted each row with a different type of lettuce so she could pick fresh leaves every day for her lunch. The organizer looked like a living tapestry, shades of green, hints of red, and tiny flowers peeking out between the leaves. She told me it not only saved her money at the grocery store, but also made her feel more connected to her food. You can also make your vertical garden decorative by painting the organizer with outdoor fabric paint or adding small tags to label each pocket. Some gardeners even weave fairy lights around the frame for a soft glow at night. The beauty of a shoe organizer garden is that it makes the most of the space you have, no matter how small. It's affordable, lightweight, and endlessly adaptable. And there's a quiet satisfaction in seeing something meant to store shoes now brimming with life, proof that creativity can turn even the simplest household item into a thriving little world. An old wooden door can hold so many memories, opening to welcome guests, closing to keep the family safe, creaking in the summer breeze. When its days as a door are over, it can still find new purpose in the garden as a charming potting station. I first saw one of these on a visit to a friend's backyard. The door was propped upright against a shed wall, fitted with a sturdy tabletop and surrounded by neatly stacked pots, bags of soil, and a row of small tools hanging from hooks. It wasn't just functional, it felt like the heart of her gardening space. To make your own, start with a solid wooden door, ideally one with panels or decorative details for extra charm. Sand away rough edges and apply a coat of paint or sealant to protect it from the weather. Attach a wide shelf or tabletop at a comfortable height. Repurposed wood, an old countertop, or even a reclaimed pallet can work beautifully. Add shelves, hooks, or small baskets to hold tools, gloves, and seed packets. If bending is difficult, this design is a gift. It keeps all your supplies within easy reach and provides a sturdy surface for potting plants without stooping. You can even add a small stool so you can work while seated, making gardening a more restful experience. I once met a gardener named Helen who used her mother's old front door for her potting station. She kept the original brass handle and knockers, saying they reminded her of childhood afternoons when she'd run through that very door after school. Now, each spring, she leans over that same surface to tuck seeds into pots, feeling her mother's presence in the rhythm of the work. A potting station like this can be as simple or as elaborate as you wish. Some gardeners hang a chalkboard for jotting down planting dates, while others decorate with small potted plants and seasonal wreaths. It becomes more than just a workspace. It's a little corner of the garden where creativity blooms alongside the plants. An old door doesn't need to be discarded when it stops swinging on its hinges. In the garden, it can open onto a new chapter, one where its panels frame pots of seedlings and its handle greets you with the promise of another growing season. There's something whimsical about an old birdcage, the delicate curves of its bars, the tiny latch on its door, the way it once held something alive inside. Even if the songbirds have long since flown, a birdcage can still cradle beauty in a new form, as a unique plant holder in your garden or on your porch. I first saw this idea in a little antique shop where a white painted cage hung from the ceiling, overflowing with trailing ivy and tiny fuchsia blooms. It looked like a secret garden contained in its own world. Transforming a birdcage into a planter is simple and endlessly customizable. Start by cleaning the cage thoroughly. If the paint is chipped or rusted, you can either embrace the vintage patina or give it a fresh coat to suit your style. For planting, line the bottom with coconut coir moss or a shallow tray to hold soil. Choose plants that spill and drape: petunias, lobelia, string of pearls, or small ferns. The open bars allow the greenery to peek through, creating a lush, layered look. You can hang the cage from a sturdy hook on a porch beam tree branch or shepherd's hook. For those who prefer not to hang heavy objects, the cage can also be placed on a pedestal table or even directly on the ground as a charming centerpiece. The height of the cage makes it easier to tend without bending too much, which is a bonus for comfort. One of the most memorable uses I've seen was in my friend Alice's garden. She had inherited a brass birdcage from her grandmother who had kept canaries. Instead of storing it away, Alice filled it with miniature roses, letting the blooms press gently against the bars. She told me it felt like the cage had found freedom too, no longer a place of confinement, but a place for life to flourish. Birdcage planters are also wonderful for seasonal displays. In spring, you might fill them with pastel flowers and Easter decorations. In autumn, tuck in small gourds and mums. And at Christmas time, a birdcage wrapped in fairy lights and evergreen sprigs becomes pure magic. What I love about this idea is the contrast it takes something once associated with limitation and turns it into a vessel for growth. In the garden, it stands as a symbol of transformation, a reminder that with a little care and imagination, beauty can always find its way to bloom again. As we've walked through these 25 transformations, I hope you've begun to see the world around you a little differently. A broken chair, a rusted pail, a tired bicycle, even a chipped teacup. None of these are just junk. They are waiting quietly for a second life. In a garden, they can become more than decoration. They become storytellers, each one carrying a history into a new season. There's a certain joy in knowing you've created beauty without rushing to the store or spending a fortune. It's not about how much you spend, but how much of yourself you pour into the project. A colander becomes a basket of blooms because you cared enough to give it purpose again. A shutter becomes a privacy screen because you imagined a corner of peace for yourself. These acts may seem small, but they carry the same grace as planting a seed and watching it grow. I've met people who can point to every upcycled piece in their garden and tell you where it came from. A neighbor's giveaway pile, a flea market trip, a family attic. Each one holds a story, and those stories weave into the fabric of the garden, making it not just a place to look at, but a place to belong. That's the gift of creativity in our golden years. It keeps us connected to the past while giving us purpose in the present. So, dear friend, I hope you'll take a moment this week to look around with new eyes. See the possibilities in what others overlook. Let your hands and your heart guide something forgotten into a fresh chapter. You might be surprised at how much joy a simple transformation can bring, not just to your space, but to your spirit. Which of these ideas sparked something in you today? I'd love to hear the stories your garden could tell. And if you'd like more gentle inspiration like this, I hope you'll join me again by subscribing. Until then, may your days be filled with light, your hands with purpose, and your garden with beauty. Until next time, happy gardening, dear friend.